So, welcome to Double Barrel Non-Duality. On the channel Simply Always Awake, we do this once a month for channel members who are paid sustaining members and above. And you're able to ask questions over Zoom. We usually get to everybody's questions, but each month I'll have a different non-dual facilitator or someone who can answer questions about awakening. And this month, let me make sure my person is here. Yes, looks like he is. So I'm going to introduce, wait a minute. Yep, I'm going to introduce Robert. Hey, Robert, thanks for coming.
My pleasure. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Okay, so if you want to ask questions or just kind of check your experience out with us, we will go by hands actually. So what you can do is at the bottom of your screen, there's a way to raise your hand. Yep, and we'll go through and call on individuals based on the hand raise. Let's start with Genus or Genus?
Okay, it's Jeannie, and I don't know
Oh,
why it
Jeannie,
does
excuse
that.
me. I
It's
must have misread it.
Stevenson is the last name, and it does it that way. Hey, Angelo.
Oh, hey.
Um, I am, listening to you and people's enlightenment stories. It seems like the truth is really clear once you see it, and it's almost just really simple. And there seem to be some people who are able to see it relatively quickly. And I'm just wondering if there's a particular impediment that you've seen for people who've been practicing for decades and still can't seem to get there. Is there something that, as a group, we might be doing that is making it harder for us?
Yeah. It's probably a little different for different people. I'll just throw a few things out there. One
Uh-huh.
thing I've seen on occasion is I have seen people who've had an awakening, but it was a while back and they've sort of, um, I don't know, almost overlooked it. But after I talked to them a little while, we find that there actually was an event where there was a very significant change and fundamental change in identity. But sometimes when it's remote, because you find yourself in presence all the time, it's a little hard to discern the fact that something changed. But if you really tune into it, you see like, oh yeah, yeah, it definitely changed. So I've had that on occasion. That's probably the exception, not the rule.
Mhm.
I think more likely or more commonly, what I sense is some version of not wanting to let go of the the safety and comfort of um honestly of like fitting in strangely. It's almost
Mhm.
like this social safety of fitting in by story, by narrative, because that's the that's the sort of hypnotic um, trance that we keep ourselves and others in a lot of times through certain types of communication and even certain types of group interactions. And so I think that's a lot of times what's at play is that there's just this fear for some reason of letting go of the safety. It's a safety thing. It's like letting go of the safety of identifying and that at some level we actually rightly know that that kind of helps us fit in a certain way with people,
Mhm.
even though we kind of know it's not true. We kind of know that story we're telling ourselves isn't true, and yet there's a social currency to it actually, and we know that, and that's actually accurate. That many people talk about, if they're just very inclined to wake up, they've always felt very different. They've felt alien or something, and that's not completely off. It's not that they're aliens. It's just that the majority of people we interact with are actually not trying to wake up, I would say.
Mhm.
And you know that there's something about the way they communicate that is actually trying to stabilize a false identity. And some part of us is like, if I let go of that, sure, there's a risk to me, maybe, or I'm entering the unknown, but also I'm letting go of this kind of safety net. So I suspect that that's at play a lot of the time when people haven't woken up, but are engaging in practices that's one possibility, but it really depends on the individual, I think. So that's my sense of it. I don't know if Robert has anything specific to say either.
I've noticed that's a common trend for long-term meditators in particular, and I think it's because they identify as meditators, and they develop a spiritual persona,
Mm,
and have a belief system that um, perhaps needs to be uncovered and investigated with a little more precision. I think you can get comfortable, or one can get comfortable with your meditation ability to calm down and focusing on maybe relaxation or calmness or pleasure or something instead of investigating and trying to get underneath all of that. I see that with a lot of people with a strong breath practice as well. It's easy to get to get kind of stuck in a breath practice. I would say investigate beliefs. Some people have beliefs about awakening that just aren't true. They might be looking at aspects like they're never going to feel, sadness ever again. And as soon as they feel sadness or something like that, they're just convinced that they're not awake. Or so I don't know what your particular situation is, Jeannie, but um, I would or what if there's anything that you want to, if there's any detail that you want to share about your experience and why you asked that question, maybe where you're feeling it right now. Where is that question coming from for you? Is it a feeling of, is there desperation there? Is there pressure in the
mm.
heart? Is there
It's
anything you
just,
want to share?
I think there's a lot of frustration and seeing that it's not uncommon to me that I have a lot of friends who've been seems to be practicing for decades and it's like, oh, when is this gonna, when am I gonna get there or whatever, when is something gonna happen, and it's like, yeah,
So that feels, if locate that frustration, I feel that kind of in the throat, maybe in the
yeah,
heart, in
yeah,
here,
and
yeah,
hard.
in the
Yeah,
heart. Yeah, it feels like a tension, a constriction almost. Yeah,
right.
around it. Yeah, some pressure in the mind and the frontal lobes and thinking there,
Yeah,
behind the eyeballs. I think it's important to just relax
right.
into that sensation as much as you can and drop the narrative, and try and really open up to whatever the experience is for you,
Yeah,
um, as being fully held,
right.
by awareness itself. And yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
It's almost like an elevation. There's no ground, there's no underneath
right.
that situation
Yeah,
that you're describing in your heart. And the labels will play havoc with that as well. They'll beat up on what you're labeling as your
yeah,
sensations right now as well. But I would,
yeah.
yeah, I would
Mhm.
try and look into whatever is arising. If you look into the frustration, you
Yeah,
can take that experience of frustration that you're describing right now, um, any experiences of heat or warmth or pressure, and how they tend to rise. Frustration tends to like activate the frontal lobe too
yeah.
there, and you get into a narrative. Yeah,
Yeah,
I would definitely point you towards trying to tease those things apart.
yeah.
And
And I guess it came up for me clearly this morning in meditation when I got up off the cushion and realized that I had just been spacing out. And it's like, is it because this is kind of something I do every day? So it's just like, oh, here we go again. Just sit down, and then the mind just kind of, it's like no discipline of it, or it's like, this isn't practice, you know, that feeling.
this too, bring that experience into the moment.
Yeah,
Really acknowledge whatever you're feeling there.
right.
Don't push it away.
Mm, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
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 you can. you can sit with frustration, I think. You have
Right.
strong practice. I
Yeah,
sat in front of you on AOL.
that's right. Yeah. That was another thing, Angelo, in the retreat, you said to someone, um, are you afraid of not, who had a similar sort of a question? You asked her if she was afraid of not existing. And I wasn't real clear on what you meant by that.
Um, I don't remember the exact conversation. I think I do remember, but I don't remember the context of the conversation or
Right.
how it came up for her. I'm
Mm-hmm.
more interested in what's going on with you. Two things you said just a moment ago to Robert
Uh-huh.
that stuck out to me. One is you said, I have a lot of friends who are like this too, and we all feel frustrated. I want to point out, like, I'm not saying you should change anything about your friendships or anything like that, but I
Mm-hmm.
do want to point out there's something very solidifying and hypnotic about a group think, a way a group of people think. And
Mm-hmm.
I would really look at that actually. Like
Uh-huh.
you're getting it reinforced and you're
Right.
believing the story. I'm pushing you because you want it, but
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
believing a story that's not true. You're believing this story that says, I can't wake up. We can't wake up. We're so
Right.
frustrated. But you're not really as frustrated as you can be because if you were,
No.
you would wake up. So you're
Right.
believing the story. You're taking a second rate version of frustration as a first rate version of frustration. So I'm pointing you the same thing Robert's pointing you to in a way. I'm saying you can
Mm-hmm.
get more frustrated. You can go deeper into your experience. You got to let go of the story though. You really
Yeah.
have to find a way to be like, don't pacify yourself with that story that you've been telling
Right.
yourself that I
Right.
can't wake up. And the
Right.
story that I can't wake up, it doesn't matter what the story is, it's the flavor of it. It could be any
Yeah.
story you're telling yourself. That's just the one you're telling yourself.
Right.
But there's something about it that you're using to hold on to. You're like actually holding on to that story. Um, I also felt it in later in when you were talking to Robert about when you said you got up off the mat and all of a sudden you realized I was just spaced out and then you kind of started beating yourself up about practice. That's selfing. The practice,
Yeah.
what was happening with the practice is fine. When you're meditating and there's not much content, that's fine. That's probably more like presence. When you stand up and you grab that story again, you're like, damn it, I screwed it up and I wasn't practicing and like that's familiar,
Yeah.
right? That's a familiar way
Yeah.
of thinking, even though it's uncomfortable. We're talking not about what's familiar and uncomfortable. We're talking about what is, in one sense, unfamiliar. Like you have to walk into the unknown and it
Right.
won't be comfortable or uncomfortable, maybe. It might be uncomfortable at first, but you're going to go beyond that. And so for you, I really feel like it's breaking, finding some kind of leverage on yourself. And you're getting
Right.
leverage. I mean, you obviously are a good practitioner and you spent a month sitting, and that's awesome. Like you can do this and you've been doing it for many years, the practice part, but you got to find leverage on yourself. And I don't know if it means working one-on-one with somebody like
Mm.
maybe Chad or someone who's really precise with the pointing, but
Yeah.
I can tell where it is. I can feel it talking to you. You
Yeah.
know, it's like you got to get a little bit more frustrated or a little more mad or a little more scared or something.
Yeah.
There's
Well, I
something
guess
that's
part of
just
me
a
was
little bit
worried that,
inauthentic in that
yeah.
expression. You gotta find that
Yeah.
deep, true authenticity that's beyond what you take yourself to be.
Yeah. Part of me was worried that there was something there and that you'd seen it in other people that after they've been spinning their wheels for decades, it's like, oh, well, forget, it's not
Oh,
going to
never.
happen for them. Okay.
Nope. I don't see it that way because the whole spinning your wheels for decades, that's a story that I don't have. That's your
Okay.
story. I don't
Yeah.
buy that. I mean, I just don't believe, I can't believe it. It's because I know it's not true. I mean, I see
Yeah.
what's right in front of me. And Buddha
Yeah.
nature is that. That's what you are,
Mhm.
literally. So it's something about a tendency to cling to an identity. That's all it is.
Yeah.
But it
I
has a
can see
certain
that.
flavor for different people and it has a different story. So you can find it
Right. Right.
and really question it, really. And one way of doing it is like Robert said, just go right into the emotion, but go fully into it. Go
Yeah.
fully into it. Don't tell yourself the story about the emotion and how frustrated you are. Feel that frustration
Right.
fully. Die into it.
Yeah.
That's one way. Or just keep questioning. Okay, wait. What am I doing here? Like, am I telling myself a story I've been telling myself for a long time? What happens when I stop telling the story right now? Or I really question it. Maybe
Hmm.
it's really not true that I've been meditating for X number of decades and this and this. Maybe that's really not true. Well, what the fuck is true then? Like, wait, what is true then? What is real right here if all
Right.
that story is just not? If what Angelo's saying, that the time and the way our mind binds into it is just really an illusion, then what is really real? What is really true? And don't grab a thought for an answer. Don't let a thought give you the answer. Don't let your story give you the answer. Go that way. That's another way. It's just like an intense inquiry right now. It doesn't
Mhm.
take time. This isn't over time. This
Right.
is over depth. It's all about going deep, deep, deep right now and be uncomfortable in a way,
Yeah.
right? Because it's unknown, but you
Yeah.
have access to the unknown for sure.
Okay. Great. Okay. Thank you both so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. I appreciate your sincere practice. It
Thank
definitely
you.
pays off. I will say people who have done a lot of practice and work ahead of time, when awakening happens, they're in a better place as far as shadow. Some people wake up very, very quickly, and if they've had a lot of trauma, it's really devastating. It's very, very challenging destabilizing in a big way in their life. So there's this stuff all works out. So, okay,
Okay. Great.
cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we have a lot of hands up. I'm going to go right to the middle of the list. We have Adrian um, Pakurar. Pakurar.
Yeah. Hi,
All
Angela.
right. Hey.
Is the audio okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. So I actually recently had a glimpse of no self, and it was amazing. And it seems that what's happening now in the place that I'm at is even to take on this this view as the witness, even that's some sort of very faint identity. Um, And it also seems that there's nothing really that I can do to get rid of the me, right? The idea of me, the identity, because that would just reinforce it in a sense, right? Me thinking that I'm doing something to get rid of myself is just keeping the me alive. Um, so I guess I have maybe two questions. Is it possible for one um, to reach that no self-realization and stabilizing it while there's still reactivity going on that's driving the behavior of the body, or um, or that has to be solved first, or does the no self-realization automatically solve some of the vasanas or the conditioning? And um, and my second question is what to do now. I guess for me, it's just sort of looking at everything that arises, right? In particular, reactivity. So I'm going through your playlist with the shadow work, but um, all I can do is look, right? Is that sufficient? Is there anything else, anything extra that I have to pay attention to?
Okay. Robert, do you want to start or would you like me to start?
Sure. Yeah, uh, you asked really good questions. I guess what really comes out for me is a question. I guess initially you spoke about a glimpse of not self-realization. I was just wondering if you had a first shift, or was that something that you would
I
describe as a first shift?
I think I had, right? I definitely had an experience that I would describe as I am, right?
Mm.
Where there was nothing mental that I held on to as a attribute of myself. And so all that remained was just being. And it was sort of surprising because I've read in various places like you feel like you are God, and that's exactly what it felt like. But that was not. It was just it was an experience, right? And after that, I started to see how really everything is a story, right? Even the sense that I'm doing something is just overimposed by the mind, just like any other mental story. Um, but regardless, even that, even if I see them as such, right, they're still there, and there's still a lot of personal identity.
Mm. I guess to dive into your question then, I'm assuming you have some access then to non-dual perception, at least. I mean, okay,
Yeah, visually.
visually in particular, and things just sort of soften. There it goes. I could feel it. And so
Everything is like right
everything
here. Yep.
suddenly it lunges forward and energizes a little bit, and you feel the sensations that are kind of bubbling up here are also, yeah, they're sort of, yeah,
Yes.
and you can almost feel a certain oneness with whatever you're looking at when you're in that. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes I have
And
the sensation, like let's say I'm looking at the text in a book, and instead of reading it, I just sort of see the page as a texture. It feels like I'm looking at myself. Yeah.
mhm. That's excellent. I think that's a wonderful place to, I mean, the shadow work is going to happen the more you do that. Things will come up because the perceptual filters are gone. There's no self holding things down. At least for me, uh, shadow work is ongoing both before not self-realization and after. It's very different after, and the two can toggle with each other a little bit. Sometimes there are areas, maybe you've already identified an area that you want to particularly want to do shadow work in. I don't know what modalities you're open to exploring that. It's something that can be done alongside, uh, practicing non-dual perception and investigating. I suppose you're a meditator as well. You sit in, you practice something like unbound consciousness or something like that.
Yeah. I've done some mantra meditation.
Hmm.
Now I just sit and um for a long time I just sat and practiced just letting go, relaxing, opening, not
Hmm.
pushing or pulling the thoughts, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just encourage you to continue practicing as much non-dual perception as you can. Just build it into every part of your experience. And just even looking at the screen now, whether you're working or sitting, just keep investigating things that you're just, in the scene is merely the scene. And just really try and go as deep into that as you can. It's not just an experience, of course, of flatness or just intimacy. It really expands and can open up to some interesting experiences. So I guess my tendency is to maybe shift your practice as much as you can into daily life, and explore the other senses as well, sound, sensations as well, and see how the really look into the precise details about how the self is being constructed. um, I mean, that was the Buddha's description of his first shift in the Pali Canon, was like two sheaths of grass leaning on each other. So it wasn't, and one he described as comprising things like perceptions, perceiving and conceiving, and the other one is just raw sensation, raw sensory data that he described as like the four elements. And these things really lean on each other. We use sensation, we create perceptions out of them, and we mold them into like one thing. But actually, when you really look into it, they're completely unrelated. Perceptions are always very flat. Even the perception that you have a body will be very shimmering, something translucent and transparent. And the sensation itself will just get fuller and fuller. The more you see perceptions and conceivings as completely artificial, will be just this enormous fullness that will kind of push all that away, and you can really go even deeper into that. Just like with the end of the Bahia Sutta, I suppose you're familiar with that. In the scene, it's just the scene, but at the end, there's this beautiful poetry where that the Buddha gives about going even deeper into raw sensation, seeing that they have no footing, that there's no reflectivity, there's no echo left when you go deep enough. keep working in that area. But did I? What was your second question?
I was just
I can let
asking
Angela.
in
Yeah.
terms of shadow work, if it's enough to just see what arises instead of saying, oh, I don't like how that feels, or I don't like how even being a self feels, right? There's so much tension back here. To just allow the sensation to be there without trying to do anything about it in particular.
Yeah, initially let the sensation be there, and just experience it as it is, and use it as a learning opportunity. It'll bring things, the more you open up to it and give it space, the more you'll sort of, and the more you can relax in it, the more you'll have sort of the path teaches itself. The awakening will teach you. I wouldn't, it sounds like you're trying to manage awakening a little bit. Um, plan your steps through that work. But for me, it was completely, everything was unexpected. I was just opening up to the mystery. And I was very ignorant when I went through the process. I didn't have a lot of intellectual knowledge at the time, and I think it was a benefit for me. I had to stay in the mystery. Um, I would encourage you to, yeah, not to, things will come up and that you'll just naturally be curious about. They'll trigger a memory or something like that, and really try and get to the root of that. And you might have some insights. Shift your perspective. Be really, really playful. You might want to shift your perspective. You might think, oh, something bad happened to me when I was a kid, and therefore you create a domino effect. I'm always sad when this happens, or this is my trigger. There's even an ownership to causation that you really have to let go of, to really be present. And you might see that it was a huge benefit. You might be able to see that it really gave you your practice, gave you this practice and this curiosity and this discovery, and really try and see things as what I call three-dimensionally as possible, from as many sides as possible. That's where I would point you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I think Robert's answer was very, very well stated, and I'll just reinforce that non-dual clarity can become even more clear. I think it will, and it becomes very enjoyable as a practice slash non-practice. When Dogen uses the term practice enlightenment, that essentially it requires no sense of agency even anymore, but the fascination with the depth of experience will drive it deeper. So it kind of carries itself deeper. And I think just a little bit of emphasis there, that's it. And there's nothing to manage here. And it will, the shadow stuff at this point will come up when it needs to, and it'll get clearer and clearer what it is that came up. It also becomes more direct and more direct. You probably know that already, but I think you're in a good place. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, let's go toward the bottom. Steve.
Hello. Hi, Angelo.
Hey.
Hey, so I guess I have just maybe a question, or maybe just kind of my perspective of something that had recently happened. I've read your book, Awake. It's your turn a couple times now. I also bought it on audiobook just to kind of hear it a different way. And recently I had an experience where it's chapter 16 called Awakening. Basically, you go through 5 steps in regards to inquiry. And I think the last step is just to kind of now look for the me. And for a really long time, when I was doing inquiry, I would say probably the last couple of years, I kind of fell into one of those pitfalls. And the pitfall for me was already thinking that there was nobody there. And when I heard that in the audiobook, for some reason, I was like, maybe I'll try it this time and see if nobody's if let's see if there's really nobody there, because instead of me thinking that nobody's there, so I was driving, and basically um I started going through this inquiry, and the step 5 with the me, when I let go of that thought that that was where when I became really curious if there was anybody there versus me thinking that nobody's there, things really kind of changed or shifted. Um, it was almost like, okay, there's nobody here, but like I'm looking around and there's really nobody here. Like there's nothing here. There's nothing. There's nobody here. There's nothing to grasp. There's
Mhm.
nothing to grasp onto. Um, and I just found that very interesting, and I just kind of wanted to share that and see maybe uh, your thoughts on that. I mean,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was
So
neat.
I would say,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I could say there are like three different ways that we could reference, or I guess three different insights that we could refer to as some degree of seeing through self. So there's one that's kind of intellectual, and you described the first one pretty clearly. Like you can become convinced of it, but at an intellectual level, maybe reading doctrine or something, almost like logically. Then you can actually look and see that you can't find a self, and you're not going to, and it's a very different kind of insight. It's the kind of insight that's more sure than anything a thought could produce, because a thought, no matter how confident you are in the belief of the thought, there's always some background doubt to it. But this is like you see clearly, okay, I know I'm not going to find that. I know it's not here actually. And then the third is a deeper realization. That's when the self structure, you could say like I can become completely convinced and know instinctually that there's no self I'm going to find. There's no separate self I'm going to find. And yet the functioning of the machinery of the selfing can still go on, and it does. When that drops away, that's a whole different experience of no self, and that's what we talk about when we talk about like anatta, or we talk about beyond non-dual. So you're kind of, I think you've realized that second one, and that's something more like what I would call kensho, which is a
Okay.
paradoxal, because sometimes what I might call kensho or I might call awakening feels actually more like an I am sense, but it's not the same kind of I. It's not a personal I. It's not a separate I. It's something like everything is infused with a sense of identity or something, but this kind of universal identity. And then that can, over time or practice or just maturity, that will kind of thin out until it's like, oh, there actually is no identity. And then you start to realize it's even an illusion to feel like everything is collated, everything is unified somehow. The unification itself is seen to be a function of identity. And so it kind of thins out over time. So I think what it sounds like you said, at least, is sort of that first shift, that first significant shift in identity.
Okay. I guess my question would be just kind of go from here. Just where do I go from here, or do I just kind of sit in this for a while, or what would your advice be?
Well, often right after that happens, or for a few months, sometimes a few weeks, but sometimes a few months, or often more than that, you'll have like a tremendous amount of clarity, and the contrast between how you felt before, or how you were perceiving before, is so dramatic that the sense of like doership may not really be there. It may feel very much like everything is in flow. And sometimes when people are kind of in that space, I'm just like, just steep in it. Just let it, just let it steep in itself. Let it clarify itself, because it will. It will drive itself deeper. And just sit with it and don't distract too much. Like, I try not to give people too much to do, because the doing can actually co-opt it a little bit. But at some point it will drop you into some deeper shadow work usually. And at that point, then we can talk more about like what to do. But even then, what needs to be done usually just appears. Everybody's a little different. Like Robert said, for him, it was all rather spontaneous and just a sort of investigation of the nature of experience, and it just took care of itself. And some people do have that experience. Other people, they really struggle with the sense of doership. They struggle with the sense of agency, and so they need specific types of practices. They need structured practice, and then doing work like the Fetter work, let's say, or working with, a very specific approach to reactivity, and calming that tendency to constantly push and pull on your experience, which is so gross in nature that it's hard to get to the finer stuff. So that can be helpful. And then anytime after awakening, when it becomes interesting to you, or becomes juicy, just starting to do those non-dual investigations can be really valuable. So there's no wrong answer as far as what to do. But if you're feeling in a state of just this kind of spontaneous flow and there's no sense of any kind of urgency, and it's very easy to stay in a kind of samadhi, and you close your eyes and you're already in deep samadhi kind of thing, just stay there. Just really just enjoy that and let that kind of deepen itself. And then usually things come up and you'll know, okay, now it's time to do some work around reactivity. And then when you start just becoming naturally curious, start to work in the non-dual perceptual sort of filters and see what's really actually happening, what's really going on. That's kind of my overall overarching, recommendation.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Okay.
Angela, I think you muted yourself accidentally.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jennifer, I was just saying, I've talked to you in person, but I haven't talked to you up here on like a non-duality um, platform for quite some time.
Hi, Angela. Hey, Robert Love. It's so good to see you.
Hi, Jennifer.
It's good to see everybody.
Hello.
I am feeling weird. So, like the last several months have just felt like so chaotic. Um, and about 3 weeks ago, I actually, after Lubina did her double barrel, I thought, oh, I think I can relate to her. So I did a session with her. It was very helpful. She really helped me kind of learn how to like dive into the sensations. And she pulled something out of me that was obvious to do with my anger, which I've known for like 2 years. Like it's really the first thing that kind of drew me to like your videos talking about anger repression. But like it's really interesting because we walked it back to like this belief that I have about like not being worthy. So like I never set boundaries because I think every need I have is petty, right? And so she kind of taught me to like to question that. And it's so funny because within a day or two, I was setting boundaries. I was like, I'm doing this, we're questioning, yay. Um, and I even like had a difficult conversation with someone, and it was successful. But like all of a sudden, I'm just like, I can't do this, I can't do this. And I thought, oh, I think that's a belief. But then I went onto your Q&A last week, and you slapped me upside the face and was like, well, maybe you can't do this. You can't force the hand of reality, which I thought was kind of funny. Like I laughed. It was hilarious, obvious. But like the next day, I just woke up kind of like, F you, dude. Like, what do you mean? Like, I was thinking, what do I do? I can't do anything. I'm so lost. Like, it's a big time struggle, right? And then for the first time in a couple of years, it just was revving up in me like, what am I even doing here? Why did I even start this? Can I go back? Can I go back to 2 years ago? Like, forget all this. No way. And then I thought, well, I must be up against some type of fear barrier, right? Um, that's the only thing I can think of. But what was interesting is I was watching your interview with Bud the other night, and you said something that you say a lot. I've heard you say it probably 30 times. And it was, you know where you want to go, or you know where you don't want to go, right? And I was like, well, no, I don't. And then it hit me. No, it's this anger suppression. It's this belief that I'm not worthy and I can't like make people not like me and all this stuff. So here I am with some form of clarity, but being felt like I'm in total chaos. And I feel like I'm where I need to be. There's like something telling me that, but at the same time, I don't know. I know where to go. I don't know how to go, maybe, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you. I just want to clarify one thing for you and for anyone listening. So when I say like you can't force the hand of reality, I want to be clear that this is one of the downsides of doing what I do is that things are very contextual. And what I'm actually talking about there is like when it comes to awakening, when it comes to like causing a shift in identity to occur right now, you have to get to this place where you realize like you've come to the end of what you can do. And something really has to let go there. That's the awakening. That I might say that's the absolute aspect. That's not true in the relative aspect. In the relative aspect, you actually may really be called to do what you're doing. You may be called to like face that thing in life you haven't faced fully. And that may be a huge part of what's going to get you to the edge of the awakening or whatever it is, right? And so I wouldn't apply that statement to like, I'm setting boundaries now and I'm working at it because what's going to happen is the ego is like, oh, I can do this, but then it's going to get scared and be like, oh, wait a minute, no, I can't, right? Like that's how it goes when you really start breaking new ground. You'll have a bit of what is it called, like beginner's luck or something. There's a sort of um, enthusiasm that comes when you learn a new technique and you realize, shit, I can do this. But then you realize I can do it, but it doesn't mean I'm not afraid to do it. And that's when the mind's like, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I can't do this. Maybe Angela said it's impossible or like so that's totally normal, right? I think I think you definitely know where you want to go. And the question of how is a very pertinent one. It's really important. And I think for you, really for anyone who's breaking this ground you're talking about, relational work can be really helpful. But the key is finding good relational work, right? What's really getting deep. And so I think working with Lubina is great. She's so sharp in this area. And in one sense, you all are opposites, I guess, on that spectrum a little bit with the anger thing, like, um, but she's going to be an awesome resource. But the other thing I would say is like the inside circle stuff, like those guys, anything you can do with them, and gals. Now that Tatiana's training with James, she'll be at the retreat in May. So, so yeah, I would say that kind of work is going to be really key with that. There are other resources too, like but finding something that really finding a group or a process that really aligns with where you want to go in this way, even though this is somewhat parallel to awakening, it's not parallel to development, right? I mean, it's not. It is. It's a sort of like personal development thing, but it has to do with a fixation or a vasana, something that has enough gravity in your experience or your personality or your, whatever caused your sort of emotional makeup, whatever history's there. It's something that has enough gravity there that it's getting a lot of attention, and you need to give it that attention instead of like trying to set it aside, right? And I think you've realized that. And you will find the way, like the resources will come to you. Just really solidify that intention, I would say. That's my sense.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I did several weeks with the inside circle on the Zoom, but the time difference is too difficult. But Bud actually turned me on to like the women's circle he was talking about, which I found. And
Yes.
what's funny is they're in my region and they're having a weekend like an hour away from my house. So I think
Wonderful.
it seems like things just kind of come along. Like Lubina was just heaven sent at that
Mhm.
time. So yes, thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. And Robert may have something to say as well.
I just want to add, Jennifer, that you really lit up energetically when you were talking about anger, expressing your anger, or just defining boundaries. I would, look into that. I think, that's an important energetic release that I saw in you, and I feel like it's coming from a good place. I wouldn't be afraid of that increase in energy. It might move things around, and it might be exactly what you're capable of handling at this point. It came up, so I would, and it worked with you, and you spoke really eloquently about that, and I saw the excitement. It feels like maybe just looking at anger differently from a different angle, from an energetic angle. There's pressure in anger, but when it's not too much, it just moves things rather than feels like it's going to force your hand to do something and not feel protective in that sense. But what I saw was more of a forward moving anger for you. I would just drop that label. There's incredible clarity, confidence in anger, and maybe and it will toggle with shame in that respect, because the shame body will say, oh, no, no, I'm not ready for that level of energy and confidence and movement. And that's a good destabilization stabilization thing to work with. And I would say I would encourage you to keep exploring that energy. It may lead to some insights. I wouldn't necessarily reject the experience of anger out of hand in that respect. I think there's often a very pure energy inside what we label as a negative emotion or socially unacceptable. I mean, the Buddha compared it to an elephant's footprint and how to drink from dirty, after a rain. The mud would settle and he would put his hands on each side and sip from the top. In every experience, there's something incredibly pure that you can take from it. And I would encourage you to look for that purity, that, look who's doing the experiencing, look behind the experience, open up to that sort of pristine, untouched awareness. And the energy can just be a portal to opening up because it can be very expansive. Fill in that energetic space. Often, anger comes up because of a feeling of lack, like there are holes inside of our energetic body, and sometimes we react through anger to just fill them up. But there are other ways to fill them up too. Use that energy to fill up your energetic space, and try and drop as much into presence as you can without that label of having to reject it or worry about what other people are going to think.
Thanks, guys, so much. I appreciate you. It's nice to see you. Love you. Bye.
Bye, Jennifer.